Welcome to the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. We know that being in your 60s doesn't mean being over the hill anymore, and that, in fact, for many of us, the 60s feel more like a time of bright new beginnings, but with the added benefit of decades of wisdom and perspective. We also know that being in this time of life poses many questions and anxieties. We're happy to bring you conversations with those who have taken actions to create or enhance their lives to experience as much vitality, accomplishment, and purpose as possible by embracing change and the challenges in front of them. You'll also learn from health and wellness professionals, creators, and visionaries who are making life at 60 plus the best time of life. Join me, Daisy Swan, and Kimberly Fowler as we explore this life stage rich with possibility, depth, and new beginnings. By liking, subscribing, and forwarding this podcast, you'll be increasing the awareness that indeed the 60s and beyond hold so much more opportunity for enhanced health, personal growth, income, adventure, and satisfaction as well. Let's change those outdated perceptions that being in your 60s spells old age for good. All right. Well, I'm so happy to be here today with the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. Today's an unusual day. Kimberly Fowler is not with me today because she's taking care of a bunch of other things. So just not a good day for her. But I have a wonderful dear friend with me, Sara Tucker. Sara is, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her before we jump in. Sara is an ordained interfaith minister and spiritual counselor with an extensive background in mindfulness work and executive coaching. In fact, we've both studied a lot of the same things, not all of them, because we know Sara loves a good program to study. She delights in traditional Irish singing and is committed to her ministry of singing at the bedsides of people who are dying. She and her partner have raised 3 children, all now making their way in the world, 3 wonderful adults. She was ordained by One Spirit Interfaith Seminary and has an MBA from UCLA Anderson School of Management and a bachelor's from Yale University in East Asian Studies. So I'm very happy to have Sara here with me to talk about loss, L-O-S-S. And, I really thought about this topic and it will probably be discussed again in another episode, but I thought that Sara would bring good perspective, and I've certainly thought about this from lots of different angles. Loss from the sense of we both have children who have gone off to college. I think we probably suffer a loss when they go to kindergarten or preschool, like as kids grow. But, you don't get to be 60 something or 60 anything without having gone through loss. It could be losing a job. It could be retiring. It could be losing someone you love, which certainly in the pandemic, I think all of us knew somebody who lost somebody, or either we were touched very personally by that. Divorce, I've been through that. Any breakup is a loss, of course. So there's all sorts of other loss as well. So I thought that Sara would be a wonderful person to engage in this conversation because she's worked with a lot of people going through transition. And this podcast, I think, is very much about coming to the other side of transition. And hopefully doing so with some wisdom, intelligence, grace, maybe not right away, but eventually. So Sarah, I'm going to open it up for us to talk about. What's your perspective on dealing with loss?
Well, one thing you just said was you don't get to the other side without going through it, right? Yeah. And one of our teachers, Daisy and I were both, we both studied at the Strozzi Institute in Petaluma. We studied somatic coaching there. One of our teachers used to always say, the only way through the barnyard is through it. And you know what's in a barnyard?
What's in a barnyard? A lot of messy stuff.
Yeah. And so, and I mean, that's the way you have to go. You have to go through it. And if you try to skip it, something really, I think you miss out on a lot of transformation. And I think, honestly, there is no way to skip. You can't skip. So that's what I would say about loss, is that if you don't feel the feels, they will come back and bite you in the butt some other time. So, yeah,
well, what I know for myself is I thought, like, for example, when my son went to college, I had prepared myself so well, I thought. My business was very strong, and I had a social life, I thought, and I was going to live in a place that, felt really good for me. And it was still just so hard. I had a lot of aloneness because I was single and working for myself.
Yeah.
And he's my only child.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like?
So I had 3 children. So each successive one was like a loss, but I didn't really have to face what it would be like without any children in the house till the 3rd one went to college. And what I remember thinking was, oh my gosh, the kids have kind of been my excuse for certain things all these years. And now, if something doesn't go the way I want it to, or something, I can't say that's where I'm putting my emphasis. So that was, you think, duh, like, why didn't you think of that before? But it was really a place where I went like, oh my gosh, now it's all on me. And that was I remember standing at my desk because I worked at UCLA Anderson for 26 years as an executive coach and doing some other things, teaching mindfulness. And I remember standing at my desk, because I did have a standing desk, going like, oh, it's all on me now. Mm-hmm. And thinking, I mean, I know I'm going to say this so many times, it's a sobering thought, right? Because we have so many things in our lives that children are not distractions, but they are a way to definitely take they're a really good focus of attention. No one will fault you for spending a lot of your attention on your kids. And once they go, you all of a sudden look at yourself and go like, okay, now what? Right? Yeah. Did you feel that too?
Well, I did. I mean, I think what it is that there's a lot of structure in life that our kids, we hold for our kids and we hold for ourselves, right? Yeah. So yeah, it's not just an excuse. I mean, there's a lot of structure that family life gives you. And, just knowing that you're going to be able to sit down with in my case, sit down with my son and have dinner, a few nights a week.
Right.
And have sports events that were around whatever he was doing.
Yeah.
That was a sense of structure. Now, I know a lot of other people who, for them, it was like, thank God, I don't have this creature around anymore. And just a real sense of relief, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I did kind of feel that, in the sense of I don't have to be on.
You don't have to make dinner. Yeah. No more homework. Right. No more chasing after them to do stuff.
It's in your hands now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that. But I definitely had that feeling of, oh, they're gone oops. And it wasn't like, it wasn't like I wasn't doing a ton of other things that were kind of also helping me transition out of the career that I was in into the next thing. I kind of had my eye on that the whole time, but it was really like all of a sudden, all the busyness and all the structure that kids and all of their activities provided, just gone. Right. So.
Right. It's a big, it's a big transition.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I think when you and I were talking about this the other day, you said that you and Peter dropped off.
John, yes. Okay. So when my youngest child, John, went to college, he was going to Lewis and Clark, and this was before the pandemic. He did attend during the pandemic, but before the pandemic, he was the last child, and we drove him up to school. And that's in Portland, Oregon. And we used the drive home as a way to kind of start considering, is there someplace else we want to live? And, we were just dropping down from Oregon into way north California and blah, 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 and coming down the coast and going, could we live here? Could we live here? And our answer kept being no. And so that was kind of scary because, we thought, well, we can, at some point, we might leave LA. Where could we go? And we didn't see anywhere along the way that we would rather be.
Right.
So that was a little scary too, because I'm one for projects. I know you are too. Yeah. I mean, you've told me you're a manifester, more of a manifester than I am. I'm more like, what can I learn next? Not necessarily what is it going to turn into, but what can I learn? And so sometimes that thinking about where could we move was a way to help us get to the other side of that transition. But we didn't, all along the way, we were like, nope, not this place, not this place, not this place. And we arrived back at home. We were like, okay, I guess we're here.
But that in itself, I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing that you guys didn't talk about that before that, because, well, certainly in my mid-50s, when I was looking towards Brett leaving, I was like, oh my God, where am I? Where will I go? And I've talked to so many people in their 50s who have been thinking about what will the new place be that we live? Yeah. And, certainly living in California, a lot of people think about moving somewhere else where it's less expensive. But neither of us I don't want to leave. but then neither does my son, happily. So I'm not.
Yeah. Well, so my 3 kids live elsewhere. I have a daughter. My daughter's in London. My youngest, the one who was at Lewis and Clark, he ended up in Philadelphia. And my middle son is in St. Louis, which is where I'm from. He's in law school, and he has 1 more year to go, but he'll probably settle somewhere in the Midwest. So part of this is like, once they find themselves somewhere, are we going to go closer? And unfortunately, or fortunately, I married a surfer. He's no longer surfing, but he will not leave the ocean.
Narrows things quite a bit.
Yeah. So, so that really narrows things. And we'll see. So I think I would say, as a transitional move, we've decided we're going to move to Ireland for a year. And a lot of people, like a friend of mine today was just saying, because I was in the ocean boogie boarding this morning.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And which is something that I have adopted post UCLA life. And it's something I will do the rest of my life if I have an ocean. Because it's so fun. It's like reclaiming a sense of play. This friend this morning was saying, how could you possibly leave this? Isn't it cold in Ireland and in the summer? And I said, it's only a year. We're talking about a year. And I could do anything for a year. And Peter, my husband, is a little less enthusiastic about the cold, but he's willing to go because I think we see it as a way to sort of reinvigorate what we're up to. Like, we don't have to make this huge commitment of totally going someplace for the rest of our lives. We're just going to try a year. And it has the added benefit of shaking up our brains, because you can get, I can get complacent. The older we get, the more a lot of people just want things to stay the way they are. And as we know in our world, nothing stays the way it is. Nothing. Change is inevitable. And so so that's one reason we're doing it. Secondly, I spent my life exploring other cultures, but never the culture that my ancestors came out of. And so suddenly post UCLA, I think it was when I really started to go like, why didn't I ever learn Irish? I mean, a lot of people are like, what's Irish? But they spoke Irish in Ireland. A lot of people will call it Gaelic. They spoke Irish until the British came and basically chased the language out. And there's a real reinvigoration of it going on. And so we're choosing deliberately to move to an area where people speak Irish. So that's going to also, like, it's challenging. I've been learning it for a year or so online in classes, talking to people. It's amazing how many people are engaged in that endeavor. So it's great for the brain to keep learning. Yeah.
Well, so in this case, this is really, there's the, just in thinking about this conversation, there's the change that we bring on ourselves.
Yep.
We choose. Our kids, we want that. We want our kids to go off and do what they're going to do. Yeah. On some level, it's like, don't go too far, but maybe do, but, but then, change that you don't choose.
Mm-hmm.
I never wanted to be divorced. It was the last thing I wanted for my son or for myself or my ex-husband. And it, in my estimation, it was necessary, and it was so hard, and there were so many things to learn. And I know so many people who, go through that, and how it just puts you through the ringer. Even if you get along, you're changing your day-to-day, you're changing all of your routines. Other family members are dealing with it, and it is a death. It's a death of hopes and dreams, and so the loss of our dreams is also, it's a kind of a death that we have to grieve, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think they talk about, what is it? There's a guy, I think his name is Francis Weller, has written about the gates of grief, the 5 gates of grief, I think, and one of those is the death or the acknowledgement that things didn't work the way we had hoped they had, like lives unlived.
Right.
And I certainly have those. It's kind of crazy. Like I'm 62 now, and I sort of go like, how did I get here? and why do I still feel, I still feel like I haven't grown up totally. And, but the clock's ticking. It really is. Like, I could go tomorrow. I don't have an illness. Like, I'm in a rebound COVID right now, everyone, as I'm talking, but I don't have something imminently threatening me, but I can see it on the horizon because I see it around me. I have friends who have siblings who have ALS. My husband's brother is struggling with Parkinson's, and there's certainly cancer among so many people I know. So part of this is looking forward and realizing we don't have forever, and we don't have forever with our health.
Right.
So that kind of lights a fire under, if it doesn't light a fire under you, you go like, yeah, when am I, if not now, when? I think that's a super important thing. So so I would say there's that, if not now, when, but then there's also, how can we recognize that it is inevitable that we will, something will deteriorate, either the people we love or the people or ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we live right now in order to minimize the regrets, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I've studied Buddhism for many years of my life, and not as much in the last many years, but that's sort of predicated on, the reality of pain, of suffering. Of course, there's pain. That the suffering, we say, is
optional,
right? If we're able to be with things and allow them, and to, accept things, not argue with the reality of how things are. I mean, when I get out of a chair or off of the couch after having played tennis for a couple of hours earlier in the day, my hips let me know this is pain.
Yeah.
But so there's a lot of acceptance. And and in the Buddhist tradition, that's said, right, that old age, sickness, and death, these are the things
mm-hmm. we
know are facts of life. And so here we are, these we have very robust lives, minds, we're physically capable. Here you are in the ocean this morning. I was playing pickleball for an hour and a half this morning. And so we do, it's like things are precious and we want to experience them as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And actually there's a lot of studies now that say that 60s are actually one of the happiest decades for people.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're more in the present. We're not taking care of kids anymore. Work has probably transitioned in some way.
Yeah. Well, I would say I'm waiting for it to be the happiest decade for me. But I think that I actually, as a minister, I'm also doing hospice work.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to balance like how much closeness I have to people's ends, because I feel like maybe I'm seeing too much of it. I don't know. So
why did you choose to do that, Sarah?
Well, I feel like I love conversations about meaning and purpose. And I feel like when people are dying, things get real, like the bullshit goes away. Of course, there might be families fighting and things like that, as they sort of jockey for, there's like, they get back into their old position around their parents or their sibling or whoever's dying.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like things get really real. And so that's part of it. But the other part of it is like, it's so such an amazing privilege to be in the presence of someone who is dying and to witness that. And why? I mean, because there's no mistaking that, like, there's a spark of life in us when we're alive, and when we're gone, the light goes out. Yeah. And everyone has all kinds of beliefs about where we go, or do we come around again or something. But just like that second right there is like, I don't know. It's just really mind blowing. Like, yeah, it's a real privilege to be there. And, yeah, so that's, does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I think that's really, that did really draw you to doing that work.
Yeah. And it's not like I want to hang around after they're gone. It's really about walking up to the door and being there with them as they go. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just because something in me allows me to be present to that. And I've had so much training being and in presence, like in being present, that it's like the true test of like when things really hit the fan. Can I feel my feet on the floor? Can I feel my butt in the chair? And then can I have my heart open for whatever is going on? Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So that's what happens there.
Well, and as I hear you say that, all these years working as a career and executive coach, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like that's what I'm doing with people, is helping them through their transitions. They're going through a different kind of death, a death of a lifestyle, or really the beginning. Of course, I see it as the beginning of a lifestyle, which of course it is, because they're continuing on to something that they're hopefully living. But so I get the presence and.
And isn't it in Buddhism, isn't it said, or didn't the Tibetan Buddhists say that if by facing death and by facing your own death, you will live more fully? And so because you stop fearing that. So you live more deeply, I think.
Yeah. Well, if you're conscious that this is the day, the day I'm here, this is what we've got. This is the moment we've got. So, let's embody.
Yeah. And I think one thing that really helps in anything that we're talking about is actually feeling yourself present in the moment. And how do you do that? I mean, like a lot of people are like I'm not going to be present. I'm going to look at my phone. That's how I'm present. Right. But I think getting out and walking and seeing like the green of the trees or the flowers blooming or a hummingbird hovering near your face, or just feeling barefoot on the ground, like what is just feeling the ground, I think is a way to handle anything. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about the senses, right? Coming into your body.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know that is, like being in nature, but, gosh, if you're in New York City, or some urban center, you can still feel your feet on the
right? You don't have to be at the top of a mountain or out in a field. You could be you could walk out on your balcony and feel the wind on your face, or, wherever it is that you are. Just like, to me, to me, the natural world just feels like it's a presence, and it's all around us. And if I sense into it, I can feel it holding me, like it's holding me. And I think that we're all held like that throughout life, no matter what your belief system is, like something's holding you here. And I just try to, I will often forget, and then I'll just remind myself, I'll just lean into that. Something's here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, when I think about the pain and the fear, right, of losing someone, when my ex-husband died, my son's dad died. I mean, we had been divorced a long time, but we had a family nonetheless, and just the sadness of that happening when that happened, and the sense of that's a tragedy, because he was still quite young, and the senselessness and making sense. I think that's what we are all looking for, right? Is like, how does this make sense? Yeah. When we face these times of loss. Yeah. And I know I would wake up. There were a lot of changes going on in my life and my son's life and our whole family, and all at one time. And I would wake up and, couldn't sleep, and I could just feel the anxiety and sadness, and very similar to going through, my divorce, and just like, because of my training, which I'm very grateful for mindfulness and somatics, really saying, okay, this is anxiety. Here with it, just like you're saying, like being in it.
Yeah.
And just like, okay, let's have a glass of water, and just befriending it. So hard, but also a way of bringing down being in it, as opposed to spinning out.
I mean, your hands even just showed that. It's like this feeling of like, okay, I was up in the middle of the night last night freaking about something, and it's just like, how do I stop going up here and come down? And because there's no solution up here, this is just a spiral. And of course, it's human to go there, because we've been taught like plan for everything, and you'll be able to avoid, bad things happening. And but that's what we were taught. But I think what we learn is that that's not really true. And what I have used for years, like, so my husband had double hip replacement years ago. It was years ago. And the kids were still home, and I knew it was going to be a really stressful time. And at that point, someone sent me a yoga nidra meditation. And I listened to that over and over and over until all of a sudden it kind of disappeared from my phone. I don't know if you have that experience where like they pull back something, you don't own it anymore, something. But I had learned by that time that the best way for me to deal with anything was to do like a guided meditation that placed me in my body. So a body scan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this morning, I happened to receive, actually, by email, I had signed up this woman, Kate Fitzpatrick, who is from Northern Ireland. She's doing this series of chakra meditations, and today was the final one. And I started her, like I learned about her when I was in Ireland. I was in Ireland in February, walking.
Right.
I was walking, actually I was alone in Inishmore, which is an island off the west coast, for about 3 weeks, and walking every day. And my host happened to hand me this book by this woman, which was about feeling the presence in the land. So it was like Irish mythological characters, or Irish gods, like feeling them in the land. And that's how I came to know who she was. And so I signed up for meditation she was doing, and I have listened to her do like 3 series. And today was the final one of, I don't think I'll be doing anything with her, forthcoming, but I've been doing that since February. And she arrived just in time in my inbox. And it was basically, a guided meditation around, it was around the crown chakra, which is up here. But just talking about drawing energy down into your body and then feeling it go down into the ground and into the floor. And it was a very timely thing to receive, a comforting voice, and a guide to just come home to the body. So,
right.
Yeah.
So that's, well, I mean, as meditators and somatic coaches, that's certainly what we know to be very effective.
Yeah.
For getting through anything, really.
Yeah.
Your senses, right? And how they bring you to the present.
Yeah.
And, that's why I wanted to talk about loss is, getting through whatever transitions we're going through, maybe dealing with other people's transitions that they're going through.
Yeah.
So that we can find a different kind of wholeness, perhaps, or the only kind of wholeness. I don't know.
Yeah. What would they say? Well, another teacher I had, Suzanne Roberts, who actually I met through Strozzi, but she teaches in Ohio. She would always say there is no home but the home within yourself. Like there's no safety, but the safety you can find inside yourself. And she would always caution, if you've had trauma in your life, that will take a lot of work to get to that being safe again. That the problem with trauma is that it basically separates you from the safety inside yourself. And so it's a hard place to get back to, but it is possible to get back with work. But I think that's a hard concept for people to kind of grasp. We're always looking for safety outside. Is it food? Is it another person? Is it an experience? Is it busyness? That true safety lies inside. Yeah. And
I think I was going to say, I mean, you hired, right? So going through that process of that's not your identity anymore.
Yeah. I thought, I mean, that was, I contemplated leaving my work for a year or two, and the pandemic arrived, and it was like, oh, I don't have to leave yet, because I was working from home, and it was a whole new set of things to learn, like doing lectures or coaching on Zoom, that kept me occupied. But it was clear it was time to go, because if I didn't go, I wasn't going to open up space for something else. But it was really hard to let go of that identity. And in fact, do you remember how I was trying to do it? I had a lot of business cards left, and I love ritual.
Yes, you do.
So I, at first, it ended up being almost 2 years before I left. I started leaving those cards in books, in bookstores, in libraries, in books. I would send them to friends who lived in other countries and say, do something with this. I was sending them all over because I was telling them, I'm trying to let go of this identity. And you can do whatever ritual you want with it. and so I did that. And then I also took hematite stones, which are like about negative energy, and I buried them on the four corners of the UCLA campus. And this was also like a year before I left, because I
remember that.
Yes. And I had worked out, like, at each corner, something that I was letting go of and something that I was inviting in. Because I think when you come to the end of something, sometimes you're like, yes, that was such a wonderful experience. And sometimes you're like, what did I learn here? And was it really worth all this time? And I think that when you're in bureaucracy and you're part of a machine, it's hard to see what you've accomplished. So I spent a good amount of time reassuring myself or rebuilding within myself what I had accomplished. I put up an art project on the wall in the hallway here. Did you ever see it? I had a card for every
decade, or
no, for every year.
Every year.
I had 26 pieces of things. And at first it was like what I had done that year, because I had written, I had kept really good track of all the different programs I'd done and the numbers of people I'd coached and things like that. I wrote that down, and then I put below it all the personal life things, like who was born this year and who graduated this year. And then it was like, okay, now what? And someone said to me, why don't you color your emotion on those? So I started to go like, here I was happy, here I was sad, and it was like brown and dark. and I cut things out of magazines and put it across. So like it was a huge art project, and it was basically helping me make the transition and to recognize what I had done, like to honor what I had done.
Right.
And I, because I was doing things that pretty much I was developing programs as I went, I was not part of established things. I was creating it. There was no one to say, oh, look what you've done. It was me having to say that. Yeah. And because I move quickly from one thing to the next, I have a tendency sometimes to not even, I dismiss what I've done. So I basically rebuilt my career on the wall.
Yeah.
And acknowledged that I had done a lot, and I was going to burn it. That's my plan, was I'm going to shred it or burn it. And I had to reevaluate that too. I didn't.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah.
I took it down off the wall, and I have it like in a notebook in sleeves. And maybe someday I'll burn it. But I think that was the urge to shred or burn was like a hasty thing of, let me just get this behind me.
Right.
Right.
Oh, and I'm so glad you didn't burn it.
A lot of people were like, what is going on in this hallway? But I think it was good because the kids were in and out too. The pandemic happened. So my daughter came home and lived with us for a little while, which is one of these boomerang things. And it was good for them to see me going through that process of acknowledging myself. Like, what had I done? Right? What had taken me away from them? Because there was some of that too. And yeah. And I know yesterday when I was thinking about this, like you and I know all these coaches and coaching resources, and there's a book for everything and blah, 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 blah. But I know that, as I was thinking about it, one of my friends reminded me of William Bridges' Transitions, which is a big book about that.
Yes.
And I read it again, particularly about the liminal space that people occupy when they're moving from one thing to another.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And that death basically is a liminal space, like a deathbed is a liminal space. And in Ireland, wherever the sea meets the sky, meets the shore, that's a liminal space. Like there's liminal geographies, there's liminal experiences that we have in our lives. And one of the ones, I think that William Bridges uses this, but so many people use it, is the idea of the butterfly, of the caterpillar going into the cocoon and then basically dissolving.
Yeah. Well, and I think just to say what a liminal space is, because a lot of times I talk about it and people don't know that word in particular, being that place in between, right? Yeah. When I was in grad school, we talked about this idea that, like, if you're to use a wedding, right? You're at the beginning of the procession and you're walking up to the altar. So you start at the beginning and you walk down that, and that's the liminal space. You're this person here, and by the end of that ceremony, you're another person. Yeah. And so that would be
and you could say there's times of years that are considered liminal spaces, like Halloween, or times are weather that's more liminal, like fog. And so you kind of, I mean, it helps to have these metaphors. I think it really helps to have metaphors because, like, it provides structure. And but the idea with the caterpillar is that it goes into that, it spins that cocoon, and then it turns into the gloppy, gooky. It's probably really painful. I mean,
it's messy.
It's messy. It's messy. And if it gets interrupted, it's a disaster. So, like, if you cut open that cocoon, you don't get a butterfly.
Right.
Right. So it's a painful process that we kind of have to go through in order to get to the other side. Yeah. And I think that what Bridges says, and any mythologist will say this, is that our culture has sort of eliminated a lot of the ritual that helps us deal with these transitions. So, in fact, I was creating ritual for myself in order to deal with my transitions. So, yeah. So.
Yeah, that was a very intelligent way for you to handle it. I don't know that I would have. I mean, it's interesting when I'm working with clients. I mean, you talked about how this helped you to recognize what you had accomplished, and to really look at your work and what was going on in your life around that. And that's something that I definitely do with clients. Whenever we're helping people understand themselves, it's, how do you use your time? What have you been doing with your time? Yeah. Most of us tend to dismiss what we do, not think it's enough, or, that we haven't perhaps done enough with what we could have done, or, comparing, or whatever that is that we do. So really having the time to recognize where we've been and what worked and what didn't, that kind of assessing.
Yeah, you need that time. I mean, that's part of, like, any coaching cycle, right? Where you have to like you have to have introspection.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. When Brett left, I went to the summer after he had gone to college. I went on a trip to Greece it ended up being 3 weeks. I was going to go for 2 and I extended. And I thought I would start writing a book about empty nest. Mm-hmm. But I was so in it that I had no perspective at all. Mm-hmm. Absolutely none. I was like, this is, I can't even go here. Yeah. I need some time. It took a lot of time, as it turned out. So you were trying to turn it into a project, but you were actually doing the work to help yourself through the transition. And maybe tell me if this isn't true, that you couldn't give yourself permission to do it unless it was productive. Right.
That's why it had to produce something.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to make sense of it. If I could write about it, I'd be able to make sense of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but I think I've been journaling since I was 12 or 13. It's kind of embarrassing to read those, 12-year-old things, but they just show me it's the same person still trying to work stuff out. And I do really worry, like, should I burn these, or are they going to be like a record that I use to reconstruct something to help someone else? I don't know that answer. Yeah.
Good for you for keeping them. I did let a bunch of mine go. I had a big box. Yeah. And I finally was like, do I want to lug this history around? Uh-huh. And so for me, that was actually, I did that right when I moved up to Santa Barbara. I'm cutting this part, this written. But I suppose these are all rituals that help us to deal with, whatever it is that we're letting go of. And that's another way of putting loss, I suppose, is letting go of things, which is, also having been in a Buddhist tradition for many formative years, when my son was splitting time between his dad and me, there were so many things I did not have control over. I just didn't have control. His dad wanted him to be on a dirt bike when he was, 6, and I'm like freaking out, like, this is my baby on a, fast moving machine.
Yeah.
But, I had to release like this. I don't have control over this.
Yeah.
And I think what we're talking about with loss and letting go, it is so much about control, what we have control over. And,
we control very little ultimately.
What do we have control over?
Yeah. Well, I think, you do have to acknowledge that there's a lot of, I was reading, the thing you sent me today about how, yes, when the more control, how you attribute why don't you talk about it? You can say it better, because I think it's speaking to what you're saying.
Yeah, right. The article was about attribution, how we attribute the things that have happened in our lives. Mm-hmm. How did I get here?
Yeah. Why did this happen to me?
Why did this happen to me? So it's very easy to, if we're feeling a sense of loss, we can get overwhelmed with, how did I get here? What did they do? What did they do? What did I do? Mm-hmm. A lot of us blame ourselves, or want to look to find someone else to blame. And really, I've actually read articles about very successful CEOs who have said it was a matter of luck, that I ended up in this role. Like, certain things at certain points, there's luck and there's unluck.
Yeah.
Right? Like, things happen that we don't foresee.
Yeah. And I think the other thing it was saying that a lot of people attribute it to their own activity, like their own movement, but so much is like systemic or the luck of the draw. Like, where did you come in,
Right. Where did you grow up, and
where did you grow up?
What were your parents
circumstances?
interested in or not?
And I think, as a interfaith person, and I would add interspiritual, meaning that it's not connected to any faith tradition. Like, I know bits of many, and I was raised Catholic and consider myself pretty knowledgeable in that. But I see so much of religion is trying to explain the why. And where was I going with this? Making meaning. I mean, it helps people make meaning, but I also think it helps you sort of broaden the way you look at things and realize, like, we have some control, but there's a lot we don't. I mean, as who was the Man's Search for Meaning?
Viktor Frankl.
The only thing that we can control is basically our reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that, if you can really recognize that, it'll make you a less judgmental person, a kinder person. Who knows if you'll be more successful in the definition, like, what's your definition of success? I think that's a really good thing to contemplate, especially in your 60s, is what do you consider successful at this point? Because obviously something has happened or not happened for you professionally. Something has happened or not happened for you economically. So what is your definition of success now?
Right.
And recognize you have the ability to rewrite that definition in order to live towards what it is. Like, you do control how you're going to live. Like, who are you going to be?
Who are you going to be? Right. In terms of, that's really why I wanted to do this podcast, like how to make your 60s feel like your best life.
Yeah.
When this is a time, like, I don't know, there's so many questions about how to have a really rich existence, maybe facing challenges, maybe having a very fortuitous a financial situation, maybe having a lot of choice, but maybe not, and that's where I know a lot of people who looked forward to their retirement with their spouse, and somebody dies. Like, that wasn't part of the plan.
Yeah. I think that's the common thing you hear, is this wasn't part of the plan. And then you say, like, whose plan? And
then, I mean, so we have a mixed bag, but I think when we've talked with other people on this podcast, we've heard about things we can do to take care of our health. We've heard from people who have made real decisions to take risks and get to the other side of them so that they could have a better life. And so, I guess it is really about, who do you choose to be?
Yeah, I would, that's what I would say. I would sum it up, and it's based on so much reading, but thinking and also living is like, who do I want to be? Not what do I want to do? It's like, who do I want to be? How do I want to be?
How do you want to be? Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a super important question to answer.
Yeah.
And you can keep asking yourself that. Yeah.
Just to keep being with that question, which is, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then everything can flow from that, and you can have a plan that you try to manifest.
Maybe that works for a little while.
Yeah. So
I know everything changes. I just watched this and we'll finish up here, but I just watched this beautiful documentary about George Harrison called Living in the Material World. He was such a spiritual Beatle. And the documentary is really stunning. It was from 2011, actually. And he was so much about, considering what happens when we aren't here anymore. So anyway, plus beautiful music.
Yeah. So,
well, thank you so much for engaging in this.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
And well, we'll have some things in the show notes from our conversation, and look forward to many other interesting podcasts where we talk about making 60s best life. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Daisy.
Thanks for listening to the 60 Plus Best Life podcast. We hope you learned useful and inspiring information today. We welcome your comments and also your suggestions of topics we need to discuss. If you know of someone you'd like to hear on our podcast, please share. We think of this podcast as a way to grow a robust community of people who are making life better at 60 plus. People who are living their best life. Thanks again for listening to, subscribing, and sharing the 60 Plus Best Life podcast.